Hey everyone, welcome. We are doing a chat today about web accessibility for food bloggers. So I'm glad you could join us. Let me see if I can get this switched. So it's just me. There we are. So I'm going to wait just a second to make sure everybody can join. And let me see if I can raise this up just a tad. There we go. Okay. It's the first time I've done a video like this. I'm using BeLive. So if any of you want to know how to do videos, that's a tool you can look at. I'm just learning it, but it has some really cool features. How are you guys doing this morning? Okay, for some of you, it's afternoon. I'm on the West Coast in Portland, so it is still morning here. So I guess we can just start jumping in. It has been, web accessibility has been something on food bloggers' minds recently. As is already mentioned in the comments here, there is a food blogger who is getting sued over this issue. Great, someone says, it's working great, yay! We're having some technical difficulties. Okay. So that's why we're talking about it now. I focus in user experience, and it's an element of your user experience. So I have been well aware of this for quite some time. And really, web accessibility, these standards started back in the 90s at the beginning of the internet. And so it's not really a new thing, but it's becoming, as the internet is becoming more applicable in our everyday lives, it's becoming a new thing. And so that's kind of what the issue is here, is courts are now deciding that this is something that is likely going to be a legal requirement for something possibly like food blogs. So that's why it's important for you to know now, is because that's all coming together. Like I said, I've known about it for a long time. I've been doing digital content forever, basically. But just in the past few years, it's become more prominent. And I know even I was talking to my sister probably a year and a half ago, and she works at Intel doing in HR. She does internal content for them. And she was saying how she's gone to several trainings about accessibility and all this stuff. And so I was like, whoa, like, I need to start paying more attention to it. And so, yeah, and you'll hear that story from a lot of people that in the past few years, it's become just a more prevalent thing to worry about. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is a court case, or a few court cases that have come up. But I think really the thing is, what's happened is at the beginning of the internet, right, like late 90s, early 2000s, people didn't see websites, the internet, as something that was really integral to life, that was even necessarily something that was going to stick around. I mean, I remember that I was working for a newspaper website in the late 90s, and it was very like, this isn't going to stick around. We had a lot of issues getting buy-in from people. And so like, it just wasn't seen as something, and it still isn't, right? Like that's, I'm sure as food bloggers and as someone who works with food bloggers, trying to explain to people what we do and why it's important and that we can actually make money with it is still this foreign concept, right? And so I think that has to do with accessibility, and that people don't, they just don't understand how prevalent it is in our lives. But I do think after this whole quarantine COVID-19 situation, it's becoming very apparent how much we need these resources that live on the internet. And so I only think that things like this are going to be increasing. And so to kind of tie this together a bit, how that comes to play, how that all comes into play is because the laws that are on the books, say in America, it's ADA. In other countries, there are similar laws. so this is not just an American thing, is that, and that goes to one of the questions already, I think Keisha was asking, why can't somebody just call in an order, right? Well, of course they can do that, but basically the laws say that anything that is accessible to the general public needs to be accessible to everyone. And so that includes people with disabilities. And so that's why making things accessible is important. So right now, the way the law is here in America, talk about it, it makes it so it sounds like physical locations are the things that need to be ADA compliant. And so that's why there's been a lot of question about websites, right? And the law was written before websites were really a thing. And so that's kind of why there's now these lawsuits to help decide if this applies to websites or if it applies only to like a physical building. So in the Domino's case that I linked to my web accessibility guide and planner, there's a link below for that. If you guys want to download that, there's a case with Domino's Pizza where their website and app were not accessible, I believe, to a blind person. And he sued over it. That went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided not to hear the case, which basically means that they either agree or just don't have enough of an issue with it to take action on it. And so it left standing the lower court ruling, which was that Domino's did in fact have to make their website and their apps accessible to everyone. And that really happened just in the past year. And so that's another reason why this is becoming a major thing. There's been a few other court cases like that. So again, if you think of it in the sense of, say, a physical location, any restaurants or public buildings we go into, they have ramps, they have handicap stalls in the best restrooms, all of this stuff to make it accessible to everybody. And so that's the thing also with websites is that anything, and I guess I should mention, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but anything that is meant to be publicly accessible to the public needs to be accessible to all the public. So that's why just saying like, oh, you could call me on the phone if you have a website. It's like, well, if the website is supposed to be accessible to everybody, it needs to be accessible to everybody. And it's seeming like the courts are going to decide that this is more and more going on, something that is applicable to websites. And that makes sense to all of us because we know how important they are, right? That's why we all have jobs. So the other portion of this is there are no set standards, at least in America, legally of what you're supposed to follow for your website to make it accessible. There are international standards that have been agreed upon by kind of the website community. And in some places, those have been made a legal requirement or something similar to them. So you need to, if you're not in the United States, you need to check with your local region on what they are. But for right now, the standards, WCAG, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, those are what we should be following. And those are leveled. So there's A, AA, and AAA. And AA is likely what you should be going for. And again, I have that guide and planner that you can download. And there's a link below for that. Or you can go to my blog at what is my blog? My website, foodblogusability.com. I should know that, shouldn't I? Foodblogusability.com. That goes over this, or of course you can search, but there is a lot of information it's not quite as bad as it looks. When I first was going through it to write the guide, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. But it's really not as bad as it seems. So those guidelines, again, are not technically legal requirements, but that is what has been agreed upon by the web developing community, that those are the guidelines. So that's what you should strive for. So let me, 1 second here, let me check some of my notes that I have. Do I think what standards will be more well-defined for food bloggers soon? Well, the case, and she's publicly stated this, Rachel Farnsworth with the stay-at-home chef is the person who is being, who's having a court battle over web accessibility, or maybe not court battle, that's not the right term. I'm not a lawyer. She has said that she is going to try not to settle, and she's going to try to take it through the courts or whatever. I don't know quite how it all works. So that depending how her case ends up, we may have a ruling that is much more clear on what food bloggers need to do. And not only food bloggers, like it would likely apply to any blog and likely to websites across the board. It's really interesting with food bloggers because you don't have any sort of physical store. Most food bloggers don't sell any physical products at all. And so it's really a different kind of realm than what has been dealt with before for the courts. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really, really unfortunate for Rachel that she's going through this, but hopefully it will end up as an awesome thing for food bloggers in the end in general, because based on how they rule in that case, we will know a lot more about what we need to do. And so, yeah, and I believe she's at the early steps in that process. And I mean, you know, I've seen Law and Order. That's what I know about how like this stuff works, which isn't really about cases like this. So, you know, there's a lot of cases out there too, because these lawsuits have been increasing. So probably in the next few years, there will be more information about it. But very, very likely these standards, the WCAG standards, are going to be the ones that people need to follow. So if you get your blog up to those, you likely, you know, if there's any other changes you need to make, they would be very minimal. So let me just check over in the form and see if there's any other questions that have come up yet. Okay. And then I was going to check one other place. Okay. So let me jump into a little bit more with some specifics here. I don't know. I also like reset up my email lately, and so now I can't find anything that I have in my emails. So let me walk you through my web accessibility guide a bit. I think I can do a screen share here. Hang on, bear with me. Okay, thank you guys. And okay. So this is my web accessibility guide and planner, and I just have a lot about why it matters and how places you can write this down. So, so it goes through and it looks through each category. So the WCAG categories, or they have 4 different main categories. And 2 of them really aren't that applicable to food bloggers. And then the main 2 are operable and perceivable that are applicable to food bloggers. And so I take you through all of that, and we can talk about that a bit more. And also, okay, I'm looking at a comment. Thanks, Megan. Okay, so I'm going to take that off here. Okay, Megan was actually supposed to be on this video, but we couldn't get that working right. So she's helping me out a bit with the questions in the forum. So let me see what she said. With video and blog content to be more compliant. Yes. So with there's a lot of things, but the things I want to focus on are let's talk about video and audio and alt text. So alt text most people have heard of, so you need that on all of your images. So that is something that you should jump in and do if you haven't been doing. Make a plan for how to go through your alt text. If you haven't been doing it, so that's making sure that every image has a description of what it actually is. There's a plugin that's linked to in my guide that can help you figure out where you need to add that. But if you haven't been doing it, make a plan. I think it's easiest to go chronologically. Make a plan to do it going forward, and then make a plan where you are doing it going back chronologically through all of your images. And then video needs to be captioned, and audio needs to be transcript. So if you're doing a podcast, that needs to have a transcript with it. With video, so this is the other part too, is there's some interpretation of what some of these rules or guidelines are going to mean, right? So food bloggers do a variety of videos. Something like this that is live, the current standard is that live videos do not need to be captioned. It's nice if they are, but a lot of things like YouTube, Facebook, they I do believe have features that will caption it live for you. But after the fact, they need to be captioned. And then for video that has music, if it's just, okay, say if you did a video that was just music, right, like on YouTube, you just put up the audio really, that wouldn't, all that would need to say is music is playing and like the song title and what that was. So the hands on hands videos, there's been some discussion about that, I know. And so when I was going through the guidelines, my interpretation is that those videos would need to have the action described out in the captions, right? So you need to think about it as far as both if someone's blind or if someone also can't hear. So if someone is, okay, so there's several elements to it, right? So if someone is blind, they can't see what's going on in the video. So also along with that video needs to be a description, a text description of what's going on in it. So often with like a hands and pans video, you will have in your blog, you're talking about what's going on in the video, right? Because it's a video of the recipe. But if you go and share it across your social media channels, you don't have that blog text there. So that is why I suggest having the captions. Oh my gosh, it does get confusing, guys, because I'm trying to like process this all in my brain. So the captions, and then so if someone can't hear, I guess they can just see it, so it doesn't apply as much. Does that even make sense? I don't know. I'm going to move on from that. y'all go read my guide. I talked about it about a bit in there, and then search on the internet too for what other people are saying and doing with that. But the more that you can provide, right, the more with captioning, the more with extra audio, the more with text, the better off it's going to be for everyone. And these things are not just things that you need to do for just people that have disabilities. Like, it's something that makes it easier for everybody, because a lot of people don't like watching videos with audio on, right? A lot of people have a hard time seeing. I wear glasses. If I take these off, I can't see very well, right? And at different times in our lives, we all are going to have likely have some sort of disability, whether it's temporary or permanent. As we age, things start happening. Yes, rev.com is, I haven't used it, but I've heard that that's probably the most popular one to get like transcripts and captioning out. So the other thing I want to talk about sort of with video and images is that there's been some questions with the guided recipes that Google just put out. So they or not just put out, but they put out new guidelines for it, and everybody got warnings about it. It was like, what's going on with these guided recipes? And one of the things that they put in there is to have an image or video on each step in your recipe card, which is not very user-friendly, frankly, but it works well for some of their Google Home features. So I think they have different tablets and things where you can, it's not displaying a whole web page, it's just displaying like the little pictures and things. So as far as accessibility goes on those, that doesn't make it necessarily easier to use. Some places, like I've seen Pinch of Yum has started I think they're still testing it. I don't know if it's fully rolled out. They're using short GIFs of so a short little video underneath each step. So the thing that I want to mention with that is those probably don't need to be captioned because it has a recipe description right there, and that's not something you're going to be sharing elsewhere. But one of the principles is anything that auto plays needs to be able to be stopped, paused, or kind of like be able to make it go away, right? And so those GIFs, they do have a feature on there up at the top where you can turn it on or off. So that technically meets that requirement. But there's also a principle which is not in the accessibility guidelines. It's just a principle of web accessibility of proximity. So with those, the way to turn it on and off is not actually on the GIF. And, that's just something to think through. That's something that like hasn't really been decided or talked about because it's kind of a new thing. But my thought would be that at some point in the future, probably 5-10 years down the road, I don't know when, that the requirement would be the way to pause a video or a GIF that's 30 seconds, whatever, would need to be actually on it rather than just near it. So that is what I think about that. So actually, I'm going to pull this part up so I can read it. Hang on. About jump to recipe buttons is what I want to talk about next. Okay, so there is something called bypass blocks in the web accessibility guidelines. So basically what that means is that on a web page, there's usually all these different blocks of content, right? And some web pages have more different, is that correct? Have a lot of different blocks. And food blogs often have a lot of different things because you're featuring related recipes, you're featuring sign up for my email list, you maybe have ads, you have all this stuff going on. So again, my interpretation, I'm not a lawyer and these are not like officially law anyway. But my interpretation of how to use bypass blocks on a food blog page would mean that jump to recipe buttons are required, because the recipe is the main goal of that page, right? Especially if your title of the blog post is chicken salad recipe, and then somebody, say, that's using a screen reader, goes there and wants to read the recipe, the screen reader has to go through that whole thing. It's not just about like scrolling, right? Or maybe they can like skip to paragraph or something like that. Actually, I haven't used a screen reader. But if the recipe is kind of the point, they need to be able to get there quickly, right? And there's actually an example. If you download my guide, there's an example in the WCAG guidelines where it talks about a very similar thing on a news organization's webpage, and says that there needs to be a jump to main article on that page. So basically, I mean, the same thing, right? On a news page, they have all these other things going on, and then the main article is maybe down a little bit. And so it says that to meet this requirement, you need to have a jump to main article button, which is the same as jump to recipe. So that's something to think about. I know jump to recipes are not super popular, but also in the user research I have done, which you can also access at my blog, which is foodblogusability.com. I remembered it that time. There is a free download that has in-depth user research. I sent out a survey, asked a bunch of questions of people how they interact with recipes on the web, and the people who are aware of jump to recipe buttons overwhelmingly love them. One person even said they won't use a food blog without them. So this is a really good example of something that would make it easier for people with disabilities that likely is needed to comply with these I can't say regulations because that's not what it is, with these guidelines, but also just makes it easy for everybody else. Like, the majority of these guidelines are going to make it easier for everybody, not just for people with disabilities. Okay, so let me pull something up on my phone. I know, I feel like I should have been a little more prepared for this, guys. But thank you for watching. How are you guys doing? I'm in Oregon. Our quarantine, lockdown, stay-at-home stuff is hopefully getting lifted here very soon. So that will be interesting to see when I can finally go out more often. It's not in this one. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is what I was looking for. Okay, so actually I have covered everything that I had on there to make sure I covered, but I can talk a little bit more about some things. So just the very basic principles. Thanks. Megan says I'm doing awesome. Some of the very basic principles you guys have probably been hearing about. So alt text, making your colors accessible. So you can use, there's like web pages that you can go to and type in your colors, and they'll tell you if it is accessible or not. So it's based on contrast level. So if it's like white on black, right, is the largest contrast, and everything is in between that. And so that just makes it easier for everyone to see, right? It's not just about people with disabilities with that. One thing I encourage people to do, and I've mentioned before, is to look at look at the brands, look at major brands, and look at how the colors they're actually using. And it does tend to be bolder colors. I've actually been looking more at lately, because I'm not a graphic designer, right? But I kind of dabble in it a bit. But I've been looking, I can show you this example that I have here too. But looking at for softer colors, and if you're trying to communicate more like a natural brand or something, how you would do that, because it feels like using bolder colors wouldn't work. But one thing that I've noticed, here, I'll show you this can. Kombucha, it's my new thing. I've been trying out the cans. I've used the glasses, like the glass bottles of theirs a lot. But the cans taste about the same, so we'll see. But see, they have like this tealish blue color. It's probably not coming across very well, but it's actually a pretty bold color. And then like browns and like tans are colors that are used a lot to communicate like a softer, more natural feeling. Again, I'm not a graphic designer, but my point of this is it's just kind of about perception. We feel like if it's a bold color, we can't communicate what we want to, but you still can. So I know some of you feel like, oh, but my brand colors are whatever, and I really love it. I mean, it's probably best to at least try to talk to a graphic designer and see what they have to say about how you can adjust your colors to be accessible, but also will still communicate the mood that you want to communicate. So it is possible, I promise. To that end, talking about links, your links, the color of your links also need to have enough of a contrast that people can see it. And one thing that I'm not always great at, I think my website's probably not great at too, is it should likely also not only a contrast against the background, but a contrast against the words next to it. So that's why kind of the web standard, which people have moved away from, but the web standard used to be like this bright blue, right? And you still see that in email often, because it worked. It was very seeable, and it was very like knowable that this was a link. And also on links, there is a principle talking about how the link should not say something like click here. That shouldn't be the link. The link should actually be for what it is. So the name of a recipe, or like if I link later to this video, the link shouldn't be see video. I should say something about web accessibility chat with Bethany Smith, and that's what the link should be. So I think most food bloggers are probably in between on that. Some of it may come with how your theme is already set up. Megan hates the ugly blue. Yeah. I mean, it works though. That's why people use it. The like blue link color, I agree. That's why everybody changes it, but it's probably the best option. So yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. Since I started talking about the theme, I'm going to mention that. So there's a lot of things that your theme or developer or plugin developer, whatever it is, that they should be responsible for, because we're not all programmers like programming this stuff from the ground up, right? So, I heard mentioned before too, like, if you do actually hire someone to do your website, put it in your contract to make sure that it meets these guidelines, and that's a good idea. Many of these themes, many of these plugins already meet them or are moving towards meeting them. So it's something we're all kind of in process working on doing better about, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And some themes probably are better than others. I know feast themes that many food bloggers use, they're really on top of it, and some of the changes they have already been making have had to do with this. So yeah, like don't. So I used to develop or help like design websites for clients, and I think one of the things to be most aware of as a food blogger or somebody who's maybe hiring out to do some of this don't, like, if you're asking for something else, listen to the person who's developing your website. Listen to the theme developers. Don't try to change some of the stuff that they've done because there may be a reason that they're doing it that way. Like, at least try to ask them or find out. Because, yeah, like, say those blue links. You're like, I hate it. It should be light pink. And then your developer's like, well, like, I made it that color because it meets these guidelines and it has to be. And then you're like, but I love light pink. This has happened, numerous times to me, stuff like that. So I think it's really important, even if you decide you're kind of hiring out for all of this stuff, to just be aware of this and understand that hopefully if you are working with the right people or you have a good theme or a good plugin, that some of the stuff they're doing is going to be for this. It may not be your favorite thing, but it's not really about us. It's about the user, right? And all users, even if they have disabilities. So yeah, again, I have that guide, which you can get at my website, and it goes more in depth on all of the things that I think are important for food bloggers. It does not cover absolutely everything that's in the guidelines, but I pulled out the ones that food bloggers would need to know about. So that's a really good place to start. And I know people have been really stressed about it, but it's like, do the best you can now. Like, and I don't mean the best, like, oh, I'll worry about it later, but like, start making an action plan towards it. And, that's kind of the best you can do now. And hopefully just everyone as a community will be talking about it more and doing it more. And then we'll all be able to, learn from each other and make these improvements together. So if you have any more questions, UX is everything. Megan's making funny comments. There's a t-shirt that says like UX is everything or something. In one of our other chats we did, I found a link to t-shirts that have like user experience slogans on it. So let me know if you have any other questions. One other thing I'll mention is I do have site audits that are focused on the user experience, not specifically accessibility, but accessibility is a large part of what I look at. So if you feel like you need more help or you want somebody to look at your website, that's something that I do offer within my audits. So you can go to my website again to check that out. Let me just check here. I don't think I put meeting guidelines. Let me see. Can you talk about links? What should we be changing for those aside from making sure? So I've only seen like half of these comments. Alt tags. Oh my gosh. Let me start at the beginning because I've missed some of these. Okay, so this is one thing that Keisha was asking about too. She was saying there is, she's seen on some websites at the beginning of like a blog post or news article where it says like play audio. And so I hadn't really seen that, but I looked it up. And I guess there's an easy way to just make the text audio. And I don't, as far as I understand, I don't think that would be an accessibility need or like requirement. It could become that in the future, but people who need something like that are likely using some sort of screen reader anyway. But I do think it's a very good user experience thing, and it's a very easy to add on. It looked like, I've not tested that out, but I think there are just some plugins that you can add, like basically make your blog a little podcast episode. So I don't see any reason not to do that if you want to. It's just another feature that is not intrusive at all that may be a great benefit for some people. Okay, so let me see. Handle video standards. Alt tags. Okay. Do you have a recommendation for this word count? Okay, or is this more of an SEO thing? Okay, so first of all, second and third of all, also, alt tags are not an SEO thing. Alt tags, like when they started and whatever, should have nothing to do with SEO, should have nothing to do with Pinterest. It is something that Google or whoever uses to get more information about what's on your page and about the image. It is something that Pinterest may use or someone else may use, but alt tags, alternate text, is there as an accessibility thing, right? Also, in the old days, I know I don't look super old, but I was really young when I started doing some of this. Like web pages didn't load very quickly. And honestly, that may be the case in different places around the world or even here. Like we have the opportunity to get our pages loading quickly where they load images and everything, but different people may not have access to higher speeds of internet. So it is like a lot of this is about being equitable also, right? So not just about people who have disabilities, like I've said, but just people who maybe don't have access to high-speed internet and maybe they've turned off images or something along those lines. And so then the text will appear. So in the old days, when we were all on dial-up getting on the internet, images were really hard to load and slow. And so sometimes the alt text is what would come up. So it really does not have to do with SEO at all. I as far as like a word count, I don't really know that there is one. For most images like food bloggers are putting up, you don't need a lot of words. I'd be descriptive, but not overly descriptive. And do not keyword stuff it. Again, this is not for Google. This is for people with disabilities. So do not keep like putting in the title of what your blog post is or anything along those lines. I mean, it is hard, I think, with that, like, because most of your images are probably of the same thing. So you're like, but I want to use the title of the food. So just kind of think it through. Like if you were somebody using a screen reader, what would make sense about that picture that you needed to know? What does the person who can't see the picture need to know about that picture, that image, right? And there's also context a bit. If it's on that page and you're talking about sugar cookies, you may not need to say sugar cookies all the time, but you probably need to say cookies all the time if that's what the picture is of, right? Okay. An alt tag example. Oh my gosh. Just let me see if I can find a picture here. There's actually, like, you can go online and there's like alt text generators too. So you can plug in, I wouldn't suggest like using those for everything, but if you are not sure kind of how to write alt text, search for an alt text generator and upload a few of your images and see what it says. And then you can start getting a better idea here. Let me see if I have an image here I can upload that would work. Hang on. Add media. Okay, this is where you guys can like drink a little coffee. I should drink a little coffee. Okay, so this image I got from Unsplash, which is a little tip that most food bloggers don't need because you guys take all of your own images, but unsplash.com has stock photography for free that is, oh my gosh, I'm spacing on the term, but anybody can use it, and they've released their copyrights, the photographers who've added their stuff on there. Also, if you want to get some exposure, it's a good place you could add some of your food photography also. So for this one, and again, I don't know if I'm the super bestest expert on alt text, but I would just say so I use this image for my survey that I put out, the recipe, like when I surveyed people about how they use recipes online. So this is the image that I use. So I think I probably just said tablet on kitchen counter showing a recipe, right? So tablet on kitchen counter showing a recipe. I didn't say go on and on about there's also a spoon, there's also limes, there's also this, there's also that, right? So it just needs to be kind of the main thing that's in the image. Again, so think about if somebody couldn't see this image, what is it supposed to be conveying? This image is supposed to convey that you can find a recipe online on a tablet and look at it in your kitchen, right? So that's generally what the alt text should be about. Okay. Good questions. I hope this is helpful. Feels overwhelming. I know I've already mentioned that, but yes, I think at first it does, but it does, and it's kind of is, but I think if you just work through each step, a lot of these are not hard things to understand or do or whatever, it just feels like it's overwhelming because there's several of them, and also because I think people feel like I didn't know this, and that's frustrating for most of us. Even going through these guidelines to write the guide, I'm like, oh man, I didn't really know some of this stuff, and it's stressful because you feel like you should or you already have or whatever. So just get my guide, just work through it, do what you can, make a plan. And then once you get this stuff more integrated to just your way of thinking, it becomes easier, right? And I really suggest trying to understand some of the background and understand why you're doing it, because there probably will be changes that come out because technology is always changing too. And so don't get in the mindset and position where it's I changed all my alt text and so it's fine. And then the next thing that needs changing, you're frustrated because you thought you already met it. Just understand now that the things are going to change, right? That's the nature of working online with stuff, right? Things are going to change, requirements are going to change. Just understand the principles behind it, and then you can kind of roll with it a little bit easier. Okay, links, I talked about those. Meeting guidelines, UX is everything. So really we need to keep visually impaired people in mind when writing alt tags. Yeah, I mean, that's what alt tags are for. And I know I don't I guess alt tags feel like the big thing because food bloggers especially put up so many images, and it is a big deal, but it's just a small portion of everything, on your blog that you need to do. But again, don't stress about it. Just make a plan. Some of these things can be changed very easily, the color of your links or your text can be changed very easily. I guess that's one thing I didn't quite hit on too. Your text needs to be large enough to be read. It also needs to have some space around it, so it can easily be read too. That's all in my guide also. So yeah, food bloggers are very focused on SEO, and you really, really need to not think about this as an SEO thing. You need to think about this, even though these changes you're making, Google will look at and be able to read your information better using alt text, using headline tags better and appropriately, all of that. But that is not for SEO. This stuff is not for SEO. Things that are for SEO is schema, I mean, that's pretty much the only thing that's for SEO, right? These things are for the user experience. They're for accessibility. They're for equitability. Is that a word? Making things equitable, making things accessible. Just creating a good experience for the people, for everybody who comes to your blog. That's what this stuff is for. It's not for SEO. That's my little rant. If you made it this far in the video, then hopefully that's a little helpful. But I think the more you get your mind off of doing these things for SEO, I know there's several things in here that people have thought, oh, I'm doing it for SEO. I was like, no, Google has just taken that stuff, these principles, and said, oh, we can use this to enhance what we're doing with our algorithm. But it did not start. And, if SEO goes away at some point, right? You still need alt text. You still need headline tags. You still need colors that are seeable. You still need great content that explains everything that needs to be explained. Okay, end of that rant. Are there any other questions here? I will see. I will pause. I will take a little coffee break. I have an S on my cup for Smith, even though I feel like most people do their first name, but I don't really like how B's look. So it's quite the issue for me. Okay. So again, go to my website. Also, you can find me on social media at Cadia Marketing, CADIA Marketing, on Instagram and Facebook. I have resources there. I try to do a lot on Instagram, although I've not been on there quite as much lately. So find me on there, and you can message me there. Messaging me on Facebook or Instagram is a really good way to reach me, and go to my website. Also, I know right now this is being broadcast live in the Eat Blog Talk forum, but hopefully we can get this video out some other places. So if you have more questions specifically about this, you can go to eatblogtalk.com and visit the forum there. You can post questions there and see some of the discussion that's been going on here. I think that is all. Thanks for joining me, and I hope this was helpful. Let me just double check. Okay. I will see you guys next time.